Dear church, let's talk about grief and Alzheimer's. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I'm joined by my good friend, Ed Greenlee. Ed, thanks so much for being with us. Ed is a banker here in town in Abilene, Texas, is also a member at the Oldham Lane Church of Christ, him and his wife, Evie. And that's why we have you on today, Ed, not just to look at your pretty face, but also to talk to you a little bit about our grief series. So we called this series Good Grief, and obviously not because grief is a good thing, but how can grief mold us and shape us into something that's good, or how can God make it better with him on our side? And so that's kind of where we're coming from. And so, you're kind of bringing us to the bitter end here. So you're the last guest that I have for this. And I really wanted to bring you in because you and I have had lunch together several times. We've talked about your situation, which has changed dramatically in the last 6 months or so, right. And with your wife, Evie, who is suffering with Alzheimer's, also, in my opinion, very young to be dealing with that. I tell you, before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about yourself, about Evie, about how y'all met, and just kind of bring us to today.
Okay. Well, I met Evie when I was 18 at ACU.
Wow.
We have kind of a funny story about how we met. Back in the old days, they had phone extensions in everybody's dorm room.
Okay.
And they passed out directories with everybody's phone number on everybody's extension on campus.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, chase somebody down, you could hunt up their phone number and creep them a little bit, I guess. But anyway, so one of my friends down the street, or down the hall, had he got an extra phone put in his room, so he had two phones, and so we'd get on the phone and somebody would get on the other line. We would call girls and just act like 18-year-old boys and give them the devil. Most of them we just teased,
Sure.
But one time he was talking to Evie on the phone, and so I kind of liked her. I'd never heard that name before. It's short for Evelyn. That's just her nickname. Her grandmother went by Evie as well. And so I kind of liked her. And so I talked to her 2 or 3 different times on the phone, and I never had met her.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd like to meet her. She seemed sweet, nice.
Sure.
And so one day I'm over in the student center, and my friend Terry Cagle, who you probably know, Terry said, "Hey, there's Evie over there." I said, "Oh, introduce me to her. She's cute." So he went over there and introduced me to her. She looked very awkward. She kind of looked at me like I think she was a little disappointed.
You think so?
So we just said hello, basically, and she walked over with her friends. But I kept an eye on her, and I saw her kind of look back over me, and I gave her kind of a wink,
Sure.
Her head popped back around real fast. So we went back to the dorm. I said, "I think I'm going to ask her out." And my friend said, "Oh, she won't go out with you." And I said, "Why not?"
Some friend, huh?
I know. He said, "Well, he said several of us asked her out, and she won't. She only goes out with upperclassmen. That's all she's dating.
Okay.
We're all freshmen." I said, "I bet she'll go out with me." And they said, "No, she won't." This is why you shouldn't bet. Okay. So 20 people crowd in the room listening on these phones,
waiting to see you
waiting
fail.
to see me fail. And so I call her, "Hey, Evie, it's Ed." Or I went by Eddie back then. It's Eddie Greenlee. And, "Hey, I was wondering if I could take you out this weekend." "Oh, yeah, that'd be great." Oh, wait a minute. I forgot I'm going home that weekend. Our whole place just dies laughing. They think that's so funny because they said, "She forgot how old you were."
She thought better of it, huh?
So anyway, but we made a date for the next weekend.
Okay.
And that's how we kind of got started dating.
So the rest was history, huh?
Now I'm serving a life sentence. See, that's why I'm betting. I think you shouldn't bet.
You've been married how long?
41 years, and just on the 19th of this
41
month.
years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
If we can stay together that long.
Yeah. Man, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so
we dated all through college, and we got married. We got married May 19th in 1979. We just had graduated from ACU, both of us. Wow. But we got engaged, I don't know, a year and a half before we got married. It was we'd been dating 3.5 years. It was a long time.
Right.
Probably too long. But everybody said, "Oh, you won't be able to wait that long. You'll get married before you get out." But we didn't.
Yeah.
So we ended up waiting.
Well, so 41 years.
Yeah, this month.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, so tell us a little bit about how all this was brought about. Kind of what were some signs, symptoms, some things that you noticed that kind of alerted you, or maybe alerted her even?
She's been dealing with this for probably 10 years. Okay. She's 62, so this started when she was about 52.
That seems really young to me.
Yeah, it is very young. She's the youngest one living out at Lindale, as far as I know.
Okay, and Lindale for our viewers
is a memory care facility.
Yes, right.
Well, anyway, 10 years ago or so, I just started noticing her. She'd forget things that were kind of important,
Yeah.
that we had talked about earlier, and she wouldn't have a recollection. It really scared me. And she was working at ACU in the business department as a degree advisor, very detailed type job.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked with Karen Fertel. I don't know if you know the Fertels.
I don't.
Karen's great. Anyway, she started leaving herself notes everywhere and making mistakes and stuff. Evie's highly organized, and she's worked as an executive secretary lots of places in our past life. And so we started kind of having some tests and stuff run. And at first they called it mild cognitive impairment, which is kind of a catch-all for anybody that's mind's not working exactly right.
Kind of slipping a little bit.
Yeah, slipping. They're not as sharp as they once were. But she worked for a little while longer. Not much longer after we started discovering.
Now, was this recognizable to her? Could she tell that something was wrong?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just give you an example. I mean, everybody forgets stuff. I mean, I forget where my keys are sometimes. You forget, I forgot I was supposed to go do this. But we were remodeling our kitchen. And it was a big deal. I mean, we had to tore down to the studs, and so she called me at work and said, "Hey, what do you want them to do with these old appliances? You want them to throw them away?" And I said, "No, I think why don't you set them outside by the house, and because we have some rental property, and we might want to use those in there." So I come home, I look on both sides of the house, you're not there. So she comes out, or I come to the door, and I say, "What happened to those appliances?" I said, "For them to put them on the side of the house." "I don't know." And she goes to ask the workers, "What y'all do with those appliances?" And they said, "Well, we put them in your garage. Remember, you unlocked the door for us." And so it's like, really pointed type thing like that you wouldn't forget.
So that was kind of a light bulb moment to you that something serious is happening here.
Yeah. So we started, we went to Dr. Brinkman, who's a neurologist here in town. He ran a bunch of tests and stuff on her. And he first thought that her problems were stress related. And so we kind of rolled with that, but I had a lot of tests done on her to make sure she didn't have like a brain tumor or some other issues. And then we started going to UT Southwestern in Dallas, which is a really good hospital for neurological problems. And they ran a whole battery of tests, mainly to get a baseline so they could check her from time to time. They would give her 4 or 5 hours of tests, which she hated. Yeah, because it was very challenging, and especially if your mind's not working exactly right, it's really hard.
Very frustrating.
Memory type stuff, We did that twice a year or something like that. Yeah. And so we went over there often, and she had a really good doctor over there, and they started prescribing her medicine.
Yeah.
And I don't know, she's kind of deteriorated from there. But her progress of the disease went really slow for a long time.
Okay.
But in the last year, it's really kind of took some really hard nosedives. That's the way this disease works. This is just what I've learned. I'm not an expert in Alzheimer's by any means, but you just kind of sail along on a level for a while, and then all of a sudden you might take a real sharp dip, and then it kind of levels out again for a little while.
Okay.
And so she had some real serious dips a few 6 to 12 months ago. And
that led to you making the very difficult decision to place her in a facility that can give her better care and can help her better. Tell us kind of, if you don't mind, kind of what that was like. I mean,
well, it was awful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was the worst day ever. But.
Well, you just wrestle with it because you just wrestle with the decision on what you're going to do because things were getting so difficult at home. And I don't mind giving you some examples, but her doctors tried to give her some additional medicine. She started taking medication a while back that kind of slows down the process. There's no cure for Alzheimer's. Right. It's a fatal disease. And so all they can do is try to slow it down a little bit. Yeah. And then she would get to where she was agitated. Evie, if you know her, her personality is real laid back and easygoing, sweet, just like an angel. Yeah. But she started getting real agitated, and they gave her some antidepressant medicine, which really, I think, escalated that. And she got really where she was really difficult to handle. Yeah. I mean, she'd be just lash out at me or the girls, mainly me, I guess, because I was the one that they were there mostly. I have 3 girls. So yeah. And
just almost violent.
Just no, well, a little bit, but mostly just anger. And that's real common because you get frustrated. Sure. I guess the decision, we knew that we were going to have to do something, but the decision kind of came to a head one day when we had gone camping with 2 of my kids, and she'd had an episode where she'd got pretty angry. And we came home, and I said, well, why don't we why don't we clean up and we'll go eat some lunch together? So I took a shower, and she got upset about something. And I said, well, give me just a few minutes. We'll clean the bathroom up. And I did. And I bet we weren't apart 3 minutes. And I went to looked for her. I couldn't find her anywhere. And the front door was open, and she was gone.
Wow.
Gone. So I'm going up and down the street hollering for her like you would if a pet had gotten out.
Yeah.
My neighbors come out because they knew her situation and started helping us look. I called my girls. I called the police. She was gone about 25 minutes, and I could hear sirens off in the distance, not very far away, and I thought maybe she'd been run over. But one of my neighbors found her walking on the access road by the freeway, some blocks from the house,
Wow.
And she was just upset and wanted to get away from all of us,
Yeah.
And that's not like her.
No,
No.
no.
Anyway, it happened, another situation like that happened again within about a week, and so we really felt like we had to do something for her own safety.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we were tired of trying to take care of her.
Yeah. And so how has she been with the adjustment to not being at home with you and being at Lindale?
Well, it was real difficult. I'm on the Alzheimer's board for this region. It's a Fort Worth board. And the week that I took her to Lindale, we had a couple of episodes, and she was real unhappy and mad at me for putting her in some place, as you might guess.
Right.
But somebody on that board, I was sitting and talking with them about it because they were just still real fresh. It hadn't been a week. And he told me, he said, I put my dad in a facility, and he said, if you can make it 3 weeks, you'll be all right, because then they'll decide that it's their home.
Sure.
And he said he hated me for 3 weeks, but then after that it worked out. And that was really the case with her too. After a few weeks, she quit asking to come home.
Yeah.
She thought that was her home.
Yeah.
She thinks that's her home. She doesn't ask to come home. She just knows that's where she lives.
So what is her cognitive awareness right now? She knows you're her husband.
Right.
Yeah. We talked about that the other day. She still knows you.
Right.
She still knows her daughters and all that.
Right. I will tell you something else. I just want to add to that a little bit, if you don't mind. When I made the decision to move her, I thought, how am I going to tell her, hey, we're going to move you somewhere else?
Yeah.
And so what I did was I found out that I could stay out there. And so I told her, this is something we're going to do.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we move out there, and I'll stay out there too? And we'll just say, this is where we live. And we'll just try it and see how it goes. Well, that's a great idea. It really did work because it helped her kind of think I'm doing this by myself. But the people out there at Lindale told me they think that was a really bad idea because it's so hard for them to adjust if you got somebody there kind of to lean on the whole time. You won't ever get acclimated to their place. Right. And so I stayed out there a couple of nights. And then I said, I'm supposed to go out of town. I was going to that meeting in Fort Worth for the Alzheimer's board. And they said, we think you should go, please, and stay overnight.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, in fact, don't come out here for a few days. And they thought that worked. That seemed to work a lot better. And it made her acclimate a lot faster.
Yeah. Where is she at today, Ed? I mean, is she can you tell it's continued to progress?
Yeah, she's worse. I'd say she's lived over there 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, and she's worse. Yeah. But that's not Lindale's fault.
No.
That's just a natural progression of the disease. Of course, she's young and her body's pretty healthy. She was in the habit of going and working out every day.
Sure.
Becky Cagle, who's Terry's wife, was taking care of her on a daily basis at our house.
Yeah.
For about the last year, the year prior to her moving. And so they'd go to the gym every day and work out. She likes to exercise, and so her body's pretty healthy.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long she can live. Yeah. I don't know.
So how has it been for you, this transition, this kind of finding a new normal? How have you coped? What have you done?
I don't really know how to answer that. I'm kind of numb from it.
Yeah.
We've had tons of people.
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
A little emotional about it, but
well, I understand that, and I appreciate you being with us today.
We have tons of people that pray for us, or come. I have strangers that I barely even know come up.
Yeah.
And tell us how much they love us, and they pray for us every day.
Yeah. And it's been, I know you have added so much to Oldham Lane since coming over, and you're such a easy person to get along with and talk to. And we've, my wife and I have been with you and Evie and before all this and hung out with you guys. And that's been such a treat for us. You've said something to me before, and you said it before we came on air, that a quote from the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks that I thought was really poignant. But
I think that that movie Castaway, somebody asked him, how did you live by yourself? How did you stand it? What'd you do? And he said, you know what you do? You breathe in, you breathe out, you put one foot in front of the other. You never know what the tide's going to wash in. Yeah. And that's really true of life, I think. You never know what adventures waiting for you. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
But that it seems so simple, but really it is profound when you think about it, is that, we were never guaranteed that this life was going to be easy or convenient or comfortable. And if that's what you're expecting, you're going to be disappointed. And so, sometimes we're looking for this grand answer. And the answer is sometimes as simple as, I just continue to put one foot in front of the other. And this has been extremely difficult lately because of the pandemic.
Right.
So you've not been able to go out and visit face to face in person. Right. And I know you've put on Facebook, if anyone wants to follow it on
sure.
Facebook, but you have pictures on there of you going to the window and y'all talking on the phone through the window and putting your hand on the window with her hand.
Well, that's been mixed. I like to post the pictures where she's happy.
Yeah, right.
But first we went out there, and when they first had a lockdown out there, I went out there and they opened the window and let me talk to her through the window, just through the screen.
Sure.
Great. That went great. But then my daughter, Andrea, and I went out there a week or so later and tried to talk to her on the phones through the window, and she was very despondent and sad and crying. Yeah. So we decided we would just FaceTime. And so we FaceTimed for the last several weeks, just taking turns, or maybe me and one of my daughters or maybe my grandkids, one of them talked to her on the phone, which is okay. But last week I decided to go out there and see her because I hadn't actually laid eyes on her in a month, and so I showed up at the window and she was so glad to see me.
Yes. Those are good days. Yeah.
And so that was nice, and we had a really good visit, and she just kept laughing and giggling just like she was an 18-year-old girl again.
Oh, that's fun.
I will say that we are kind of dating. I guess before the pandemic, I would go out to her dorm, and pick her up and take her to dinner and bring her back before the curfew, So it's kind of how we've talked about it and laughed about it. But it's really helped our relationships quite a bit for her to be taking care of her basic needs by some trained professionals. Because I know she still gets upset with them, but me, she never gets upset with anymore. She loves me, And
that's a really neat way to put it, that you've just made the most of it by treating it like, hey, we're dating again.
It's great.
Like you're back in college. And
I know it won't always be that way, because there's a lot of I've tried talking to I've made friends with people out there that have relatives out there, and I'll say we had a really good time. We went out to eat. Oh, well, I can't take my husband anywhere. So you have to be really careful because that could hurt somebody. But at the stage she's in right now, I can still take her to eat. But she just needs a lot of assistance, just taking care of her daily basic needs.
Right. So what, Ed, have you learned about Alzheimer's through all this? I'm sure you've learned a lot. You said you're not an expert a while ago,
I'm not, but it's a cruel disease because you end up losing them a little bit at a time. Yeah, it's a little different than cancer. I've had my mother and dad and brother have all died of cancer, so I have some experience with that too. Yeah, and within the last 9 years. Right, and so. With cancer, most cases, their mind's still pretty good. They just suffering physically, and then it's over. Her case is a little bit. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. You just see it slipping through your hands. It's like watching somebody drown, but you can't do anything to save them. It's a hard thing.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah. I mean, when you love somebody that much, to see dealing with that. So, I know that our viewers and listeners. That are tuning in are probably looking for kind of the, first person perspective for you, and, being a godly person, being a Christian. So how has this changed your relationship with God, if any? Has it drawn you closer?
I feel like you have to rely on God. It's real easy to get in the habit, well, I'm doing pretty good. I've done this all myself, and everything's great. But when things are bad, you really think you have to take a look around and say, you know what, I can't do this. Yeah. I need somebody.
Yeah. I haven't dealt with this kind of issue. My mother passed away a few years ago suddenly. So but I have a very limited, bucket of resources to pull from. Right. But one thing that I think it's got to be hard, I would think, to get through something like this without your church family, without God. And
I have friends from Oldham, which we haven't been over at Oldham very long, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. But people call me or text me just kind of see how I'm doing from church, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know what people that don't have the Lord, I don't know how they, or church friends, I don't know how they get through something this drastic.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, I've heard folks discuss this before, how to interact with your loved one that's going through Alzheimer's, because they say, well, don't argue with them. If they believe something is so, then you just roll with it. I mean, how's your interaction with Evie, especially when she's angry or, and now of course you've got help with Lindale, but before that, I mean, what advice would you give of how to interact and continue a relationship?
You got to pick what's important. If somebody's telling a story and they get some of the facts wrong, what difference does it really make?
That's right.
Because it's real easy to say, well, you weren't wearing black, you were wearing blue,
Yeah, don't correct them.
Yeah, correction, that. And one other thing is not to say, don't you remember you need to do this, or do you remember just doing it? Because that's the very frustrating thing for somebody with Alzheimer's. They don't remember.
Right.
They might remember something about it, but Evie, for a long time, people wouldn't know that she was sick because they have such good coping mechanisms.
Sure.
She'd let me answer all the questions, or she'd say, she'd kind of follow your lead and say what she thinks she wants you to hear. You know? That's just typical. You just said it takes a lot of patience, which I'm not a very patient person.
Yeah.
But
You've learned that.
I've learned a lot about patience, but it's maddening.
Yeah.
It's a maddening disease.
We've talked about in this whole series, grieving loss. Are you kind of grieving this as you go along? Is this different than any other grieving process in that you're kind of, they're still here, but you're grieving?
Yeah, it's a grieving process. They even tell you that at Lindale. It's a grieving process, just like losing somebody, because you are losing them.
Yeah. You're just losing them
a little bit
day by
at a time.
day and not.
It is. It's very sad. It's very lonely.
Yeah.
It's very, you don't really feel like you have anybody to talk to. I know, yes, I have friends to talk to, but you know how when you come home and see your spouse and you say, hey, I was telling you yesterday that such and such happened. Well, it turned out completely different, and this is what happened. Well, you don't have that. You don't have anybody to talk, to have that kind of conversation with. It's a sad and kind of a lonely experience.
Has that been the biggest adjustment? I mean, what would you say is the biggest adjustment in all this? Is just not having her when you come home? And
yeah, that's hard, but I've never been one to be by myself. I've always lived with other people. In college, I had roommates, and so for 6 months, I've kind of lived by myself, cooked for myself, or fed myself. Yeah. Which I'm not feeding myself very good because I don't have any boundaries.
Nobody hold you accountable, huh?
Nobody gets on to me. And so I don't know. It's been hard to kind of learn how to live by myself, and I've kind of gotten used to that part of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just it's kind of a little bit surreal, nearly like a dream, I guess.
Yeah, you said a while ago your description would be numb. Is there a part of this where you're just kind of keeping yourself busy and going through the steps and maybe, just trying to keep that at bay for a while, just coping completely with all that's coming?
It's real important, and this is something I would like to advise anybody that's going through this. It's really important to take time for yourself to do something recreationally or fun. Yeah. Because studies show that in many cases the caretaker dies before the person with the disease because you just get so wore out. Right. And if you don't take some time to recharge your batteries, it'll kill you. So I try to take time to do that, but it's hard to do because you feel a little bit guilty about going and having fun.
That's exactly what I was about to ask you. Is there a feeling of guilt there? And that's something else I wanted to ask you too. Is for those tuning in, what advice? That's one good piece of advice. What other advice would you give someone who is dealing with this on a very real basis?
Well, I'd find some support groups to get in, or some friends, especially friends. They may not have any experience with Alzheimer's, but are with whatever you're dealing with. But it's really important to have some people to talk to, and people that will hold you accountable for, are you taking time for yourself? Yeah, you got to. Yeah,
I've heard that same thing, is that the caretaker oftentimes so much neglects themselves because they're pouring all their energy into the sick individual, and rightfully so. I mean, you can understand that. And then they feel guilty if they do take time for themselves, and they want to be there in case anything happens or anything goes wrong. But I also hear what you just said. Many times people will say you gotta take care of yourself.
I'll just add to that. I don't know if you saw, there was a few months ago, maybe a year ago now, I don't know. there was a clip on 60 Minutes that was really good. And it only takes about 15 minutes to watch it. I think you could probably watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it was a man that his wife got Alzheimer's, and 60 Minutes came and interviewed him. And then they came back every year for 10 years
wow.
and interviewed him and his wife. And it was really, a couple of things struck me really hard about. Of course, she deteriorated. He said he would never put her in a nursing facility, but she got so bad he had to have some help. But a couple of things really struck me. One was how he deteriorated, because he looked terrible by then, because he was just trying to do so much on his own.
Sure.
Trying to keep her at home, which I understand that. And some people can't afford to have somebody take care of their relative or whatever, or maybe they just feel like they should.
Right.
But the other thing that really struck me was when they were interviewing him, they said, "Well, this is more than you signed up for, and then you didn't sign up for this." He goes, "No, I did sign up for this."
Oh.
He said, I promised her I'd take care of her. And I thought, gosh, that meant a lot to me.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when I do premarital counseling, or before I do a wedding, we talk about, those vows state for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do you part. And we always, especially when we're standing looking at each other in the eye and exchanging those vows, we look at the for better part in richer. Health, for richer, not for poor. Yeah. We look at all the positive sides of that instead of, I try to remind them, okay, so, when he's got that turkey neck and, maybe she's got the flabby arms, or, when maybe you have to change her diaper, or, are you still all in? And I don't know that we always consider that, when the giddiness of, and I understand, but it's giddy, you're excited and all that, but, you're living this, that, if you're together long enough, there's going to be some things come up. And like you said, I signed up for this. I love that.
I liked it that he said that, because you don't hear too many people doing that.
Yeah.
Somebody from the Alzheimer's Association gave me a clip to watch, and I can't remember the person's name, but it was somebody famous she got Alzheimer's. And her husband said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go on with my life," because that's what she would want. Yeah. And so he got a girlfriend, and then the girlfriend moved in with him and her. They all three lived together, and he had this girlfriend, and they were taking care of her. And he said, "Well, I'm not going to let her cheat me out of my life." And I thought, gosh, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
I know it. It's just incredible. So to hear somebody on 60 Minutes say, "No, I did sign up for that," I thought that was very refreshing. You know? And I really have held that tightly to myself.
That's awesome.
You were asking me a while ago what advice I'd give to somebody. The first thing I'd advise anybody, even whether you're dealing with this or not, go out and buy long-term health and long-term care insurance if you don't have it.
Yeah,
because once you need it, it's too late.
Yeah.
And it's very, very expensive to take care of somebody in a facility. Mm-hmm. It could bankrupt you quickly. So when Evie first started showing signs, I rushed out and was able to acquire some. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But if you've got to have a lot of money if you don't have it. And so I would encourage people to do that.
That's a practical side of this that we don't always talk about. We talk about the emotional side, but the practical side is it costs real dollars.
That's right.
To get care for your loved one, and that's a good point. Ed, I'd also like to ask you, with your permission, that folks who have questions, we always tell them to email the podcast. Okay. And if they have a specific question for you, I might direct that and send that on to you, if that's okay.
No, that'd be great.
And we do have folks that like to, kind of pick your brain a little further. And so we want to give that option. The email address is always on the screen. It's chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. So if you have questions or comments, please send those to me. I'll make sure that Ed reviews them. And if you have one just specifically for him, then he'll answer that for you, and we'll get back to you. And I just appreciate you so much coming on. I know this was heavy. I know it's hard for you to share all this. And, we're in this with you together as a church family and as your friend, because, you and Evie and my wife have been out and double dated and had some good times. And it's just, it's hard. It's hard because in some ways it's much more difficult because, losing someone close to you is difficult. It's hard. And I don't mean to diminish that. Watching them slowly pass is tough.
It's hard.
And I know that other folks are in that boat, and we want to be of help to you guys in any way that we can. I just thank you so much for coming on. Yeah.
Can I say one other thing?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
please.
there's one other thing I really wanted to say because people have been married a long time like us. People say, oh, y'all have a great marriage, and we do. But people just assume that you never had any problems.
Yeah.
You know, I think about this every year, especially right here at our anniversary, but that nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we had all kinds of problems, especially early on in our marriage. Everything that you can think of, probably we had the problem with it.
Exactly.
And I mean, we even talked about even splitting up. And Evie said, I made the comment one day, I think things are too late for us. And she said, no, it's not too late. Even if we got divorced, it wouldn't be too late for us to work out something.
Yeah.
And so I am so thankful that I stuck it out.
Yeah.
And even through these problems that we've had, our marriage has grown. We've had to pull together instead of fighting each other, trying to get our own way. You know, we finally started living toward trying to accommodate each other. Yeah. And it's made for a really good marriage. And I would certainly do it all over again, even knowing that she got Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
You know,
you wouldn't trade this for anything.
No. So I'm just telling you, if you're struggling in your marriage and you think, gosh, I'd rather go do something else, man, it's not worth it. Yeah. Stick it out, make it happen. You know, you'll be so thankful. I'm so glad that I did.
Even though it ends at Lindale, and you know,
no
it's still
question,
worth it.
No question, I'd do it all over again.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome to hear,
and
that's a big encouragement. I appreciate you sharing that point, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Again, you can email the show, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We'd like for you to share about the show. You can find us on iTunes and Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. We just thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.